Good evening, sisters, brothers, and siblings. Thank you so much for joining us for our Facebook Live event about the award-winning movie Mine 9. This is our premier WorkFlix event. But before we get to that, let me introduce myself. My name is Lisa Jordan. I'm the Director of Education for the United Steelworkers. I see that many of the people on this call are our members, but if you're not, what you should know is yes, we organize and we represent steelworkers. But we also represent nurses and aluminum workers. We represent those who work in refineries and those who work in hospitals. We make the newspapers, we make the toilet paper and the tissue that everybody's trying to get, and the paper towels that no one can find. We represent public sector workers, and yes, we represent miners. If you can think of a sector in the economy, we probably represent somebody. And if you don't currently have a union, we could probably represent you or help you find a union that would best serve your needs. We make products that you know about, like the Solo Cup that maybe you have in your hand right now, or the Captain Morgan that you might have in that cup. And we have members in Canada, the United States, and the Caribbean. So why are we doing this? Every day during this crisis, we had essential workers. We had the people who work in nursing homes and hospitals. We had the people who had to go to work in the steel mills, go to work every single day and worry about where they were going to bring COVID-19 home to their families. But they went because we need the work that they do. And we had other members who got laid off because of the slowdown in the economy, people in our tire sector. And those workers are home worrying about when and if they'll go back to work. So what we know in the labor movement is we need jobs, we need bread, but we need roses too. We need things that feed the soul. So we decided that we would have a movie series and look at movies that talk about workers. And Mine 9 was a movie that came to the top. It's a movie that our members were watching and they loved. So we wanted to spend some time with that movie. You see, in the union, we're a family, and families get together and they support one another. So what I'd like to do is I'd like to get you to grab your popcorn, grab a beverage, sit back, and let's watch the trailer for this amazing movie.
Oh, my. Oh, my.
First day underground's not like the first day in kindergarten.
Well, if those boots are waterproof.
Look, the stream is no more than 60 feet deep. Rivers, lakes, wells, no more than 200 feet. We are cutting coal 2,000 feet deep. Now, we are filled up with more methane than any other mine in this area.
You call them shut. And they come down and go down that mine. They gonna shut us down, methane or not. Paycheck's more important than getting shut down.
Paycheck ain't gonna mean shit if you die 2 miles in, Kenny. We got no mine rescue. We got no outside foreman. Cutting coal's risky business, son. Gotta hold your arm down here, understood? When those pumps give out, and they will, then my men are gonna drown 2 miles in, unless an ignition burns us up first. And we are all sitting right in the middle of it.
God's gonna protect us.
God will not protect us in hell, John.
Just breathe what you got.
Wow. I don't know about you, but I had trouble watching this movie. I don't know if it's because of the claustrophobic hell that the director and the cast did such a good job depicting, or my incredible anger. Like, I know that this is a movie that's fiction, but I also know that every day workers go out to unsafe working places. And I know that we fight to try to make that better. And I think this movie does such a great job of depicting what it feels like to have that battle. But the movie raises a lot of questions that we want to talk about this evening and that our members have been talking about a ton. And as I said, we represent minors, so we can't have a conversation about this movie without talking to a couple of minors first. So I'm really happy that tonight we have Steve Hunt with us. Steve is the director of our District 3, which covers all of Western Canada. Steve's a minor, and he's somebody who advocates globally for minors to make sure they don't work in the kind of conditions that are depicted in this movie. And we have Phil Smith, who's with us from the Mine Workers Union. The Mine Workers Union, the UMWA, is a union that covers workers not only in coal mining, but in manufacturing, in clean coal technology, and in healthcare. And Phil is their communications director, but he's going to talk to us a little bit about what the difference would have been if you'd worked in a UMWA mine. So, Director Hunt, I'm just curious, as somebody who comes out of mining and watched this movie, what do you think of the movie? And can you give us a few comments about working in mining?
Sure. Thanks, Lisa. And hello, everybody. Look, the movie's great. It's hard to film underground, and it's hard to really portray what happens in real life. But as a miner, a previous miner, I started my career in mining. And as Lisa said, I mean, the parallels to real life, I think, are shocking. And you know, when we reviewed the movie, people were convinced that it was a non-union mine. First off, it needed a union desperately, and I think Phil is going to talk about that. But in my experience, I testified at a hearing at a mine that exploded in Stellarton, Nova Scotia in Canada. On May 9th, it was the 28th anniversary of that explosion. And when the mine exploded catastrophically, it killed all 26 miners that were underground. 11 miners are still underground. They're still entombed in that mine, and they'll never get the bodies out. The mine exploded because it was really, really dangerous. It had an extreme buildup of methane gas, which is oftentimes very common in coal mines, and coal dust. And the combination between the two exploded the mine up, and as I said, killed everybody there. And I call it economic heroin. We were in an organizing drive when the mine blew up. We actually had enough support to apply for certification. And the biggest issue that the miners had at that time was they were worried about their health and safety. And they were worried that something catastrophic was going to happen. Unfortunately, we didn't get the certification in time, and all 26 workers died. The carnage it left behind is horrific. And you know, people still suffer today because of it. So Mine 9, you know, really brings that home, I think. And to anybody that thinks that you can work on a non-union mine, probably not a good idea. Probably best to get some help and get some real help with you. So anyway, that's my experience briefly, but I thank everybody. I thank you for the opportunity to kind of share a little bit of mining history in Canada.
Thank you, Steve. One of the things that all those that on this live feed should know is that in Canada, there's a law called the Westray Act that came out of that mining disaster that Steve was talking about. And under the Westray Act, if an employer kills a worker, they can be held criminally liable. And because industrial homicide is homicide. So that's an act that Steve has really led the way in trying to enforce. And we feel like that's a really part of what we do as a union, is to make sure that all workers are protected, including our members. So I'm just curious, Phil, what did you think of the movie from a UMWA perspective?
Well, I thought the movie was good. I think it portrayed a lot of things very accurately. First of all, I want to thank you for having me on this. You know, my father was a lifelong steel worker, and the Steelworkers Union has always done a very good job of representing its members better than a lot of other unions. You know, I thought the movie was very good. I thought it portrayed pretty accurately what these people are like. You know, they cared about each other. They cared about each other underground, but they cared about each other on top of the ground. Now, yes, they were related in many respects, but still, and it showed the tight knit of the kind of communities that these people come from. Miners go to work in these mines because they're the best jobs around by far. Even if it's not a union mine, they're still getting paid a pretty good wage to keep the union out. They're still being treated pretty well with respect to some healthcare benefits and stuff like that. But when it comes to being underground, it's a whole different story. I think the movie portrayed also very accurately how the non-union miner doesn't have the same rights and privileges that a union miner does. You know, in our contracts, we have the right to refuse to work in an area if we deem it to be unsafe, not if the company deems it, not even if the federal government or the state government and their inspectors deem it. If we deem it to be unsafe, until the company makes it so, we're not going to work there. They obviously did not have that opportunity that was depicted in this movie, and no non-union miner does either. You know, I've been the union's communications director since 2005, and there have been several disasters and explosions and fires underground at the Sago mine in West Virginia, some of which is kind of familiar to people who are familiar with that. They saw some of that in this movie. Some of it from the Kentucky Derby disaster later that year in 2006 in Kentucky. And of course, the Upper Big Branch explosion in 2010. 29 miners were killed in West Virginia. All of those were non-union mines. Union mines are safer mines. Statistic after statistic, study after study proves that. And I think what Steve said is right. If you're a miner and you're watching this and you don't have a union, give us a call because you need one. That said, I think the movie is good. I appreciate the work that these guys did. I think Eddie captured the feeling of the folks. You know, he's from West Virginia. I think that helps. Some of the other cast members are from West Virginia. I think that helps as well. But I like the movie. You know, I saw a lot of things that I think they'll talk about a little bit later that aren't quite the way things happen underground. But that said, it is a movie, and they needed to do what they needed to do to get the story told. So thanks for having me on. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much, brothers. I think one of the things Phil just said really rang true. One of the things we did with this movie is we watched it as a community and got together and had a conversation. One of our brothers, who is a nickel miner up in Canada, in Sudbury, Canada, local 6500, said, his name's Eric, he said, you know, the thing that struck me about this movie is that they were able to encapsulate all my fears about what it's like to be under the ground. Because when I'm under the ground, I worry about getting crushed. I worry about getting trapped. Because in reality, under the ground, we as miners are the softest thing there. Everything else is harder. Everything else is faster. Everything is tougher. And so I think that's a testament to this movie, that when our members watched it, our miners, they said it really resonated with them. It captured their fears and their concerns. So we're going to move and talk about how they managed to make that magic. Like, how did Eddie write a movie that was so spot on about the brotherhood and about the fear? And I think to do that, and then how did the cast play such amazing roles? So I want to turn it over to Burke Allen, who is the lead of Allen Media Strategies. And Burke's going to introduce us to the cast, and then we've got some questions from our members. If you're out there, please send us through the live feed some questions of your own, and we'll make sure those get asked. And so I'm going to turn it over to Burke now.
Thank you, Lisa, and thank you all so much for having us. I grew up in the coal fields of southern West Virginia. I'm from the small town of Logan, West Virginia. Both my grandfathers, all my uncles were miners. My dad was an employee of the Island Creek Coal Company, and when I had the opportunity to work on Mine 9 after one viewing, I just had to do it. It was a passion project because those are my people, and your members are my people. And this movie, as most movies are, is a group effort. It takes a whole lot of people to put it together, but it starts with one visionary guy. And first guy I want to tell you a little bit about himself is a guy that lived with this story for almost 15 years before he brought it to the screen, and that's the director and the writer, Eddie Mensore.
Hi. Thank you all for having us. Sincerely, it's a real honor to get to, you know, it's a privilege for us to even get to talk to the Steelworkers Union and the Miners Union. So thank you for having us. What was your question, Burke?
Tell me about living with this movie for all those years and why it was important for you to make it.
I wanted to make it first and foremost because I'm a filmmaker, and growing up in Appalachia, you know, you always got to write what you know. And just being, just knowing about coal mines it was something that was intriguing to me. You know, I'm not a coal miner. I don't come from a coal mining family, but I do know these men and women are working, you know, 2 miles into the earth, and it's very scary. And what they're doing is providing a wonderful service for our country. So as a filmmaker, I wanted to make it to tell a good claustrophobic thriller. And as a West Virginian, proud West Virginian, I wanted to make it as something to honor these men and women who do so much for the rest of us on the outside.
Very good. And we're going to talk to some of the cast members who look a little different without being down in the gob and having the coal dust on their faces. They're a little cleaner today. But before we talk to those guys, I'd like to introduce you to some of the behind the scenes people that really make this movie happen. And one of the things that I was really drawn to this film about, Eddie wanted to get it as right as he could. So he brought in Dave Jones to help out. Dave, what was your role behind the scenes in Mine 9?
Well, whenever Eddie had questions about coal, I pretty well filled in and answered those questions. So both of us went to West Virginia University together. We both born in West Virginia, so we have those kind of roots. But I did go the coal mining route, and so I had a lot of inside information and knowledge as to how to make it flow and how to make it more realistic, so that the story and the characters that he created could actually be brought through correctly. So that was the best of my ability to do that, while also, as was said earlier, trying to maintain a story that was cohesive and could be followed and was a good movie at the same time.
I think some of the viewers might be interested to know how long you spent in the mines and what were some of the jobs you did there.
So I'm a black hat coal miner in 9 different states. I've also strangely had the opportunity to go do some interesting projects in other places like Colombia. So for those coal miners in this world that haven't been in an underground coal mine in Colombia in about 36 inches by 48 inches, that takes it to a whole different level. But I've worked mostly out by, but I've done some in by work of all different types and spent about 15 years in the industry.
Thanks, Dave. ANAITTE, can you explain what it is that you did in the movie? Because yours is the behind the scenes magic that really pulls it together.
Hi. First and foremost, thanks for this event and thanks for joining. I was the visual effects supervisor and artist who grabbed footage that was filmed in the actual mine, footage that was filmed on set, and meshed it all together and created all the visual effects and cleaned things up or dirtied things up more than anything. And just made all the explosion happen. That's why we have that cast to speak with today, and thankfully they didn't suffer the catastrophic events that happened in the movie.
I appreciate you not blowing anybody up in the making of this film. Thank you.
Yes.
Tim Barrett, tell folks what you did behind the scenes.
Hi, thank you for the opportunity to speak about the film. It was a wonderful opportunity to work with such an amazing cast and tell this story. I was the production designer. I was in charge of putting together all the visuals and telling the story, working with Eddie and ANAITTE. We all came up with a strategy to plot it together and then be able to have what we needed when we went into editing to assemble it all.
Can you give us an idea for the folks that are not movie folks? What does a production designer do? What was your physical job on that film?
Well, the production designer's job entails everything from like the visual look of the show, the design of it, to designing them in the sets, and then working closely with the set dressing department, the wardrobe, and in selecting the dressing for it, or the color of the wardrobe, or everything across the board. So, and then you have to also help set up the shots and the framing of it.
Very good. Thank you, Tim. And Matt Boyd, I see in the lower right of my screen, and I'd love to have you sort of tell what your contribution was to the film.
I'm the director of photography. At the bare bones, description of the job is to be the visual liaison for the director. So read the script, talk to the director, find out what they want to do, and then work with people like ANAITTE and Tim to bring it all together as the trifecta visually, and then the actors bring the magic and bring it to life, and we just hope we can capture their magic.
Having spent a little bit of time underground, not a miner, but family of miners, and being down there, it's just amazing the job that Eddie and the entire crew did. Let's talk to Terry Serpico, who was sort of the conscience of the film. Tell us about your character and your contribution.
Well, good evening, y'all, and thank you very much for having us. Eddie, thank you for this movie. It's you've done a wonderful job in trying to depict the lives of these miners, and we're very honored to be able to try and bring that to life as best we can. Again, my name is Terry Serpico. I played the role of Zeke in Mine 9. And yes, I believe Zeke to a great degree was the conscience in some ways, or at least the more vocal conscience, in that my character believed that we were operating under some very dangerous conditions, that our mine was expressing more methane than most in the area, that this was just a recipe for disaster. And I was trying to talk my miners, one of which being my brother, played by Mark Ashford, another being my nephew, played by Drew Starkey, that it would probably be in our best interest and the best interest of those of our families if we were to vote to stay out of the mine, because it was just becoming too dangerous and too untenable, and that our lives were literally on the line. And there's a great scene in there before we go in for our shift, that we're taking that vote. What do we do? And there's that wonderful line about, if I'm dead underground, I'm worth more than I am alive above ground and unemployed. And that is a horrible a quandary, and that is a horrible choice for anyone to have to make. And we are so grateful to be able to tell that story.
Thank you, Terry. You mentioned Mark Ashworth. Mark is also on the call. He joins us from Atlanta today, and Terry is in South Carolina. So, Mark, your character in the movie was who?
So I played Kenny in the movie, Zeke's younger brother. I'm one of the miners that goes down and kind of gets stuck down there throughout the film. One of the survivors too. Bringing my son down there is kind of the family tie, like my big brother just said. I'm a ruffian, so to speak, on film with my son who's a red hat. But yeah, I'm honored to be here tonight, and so honored to be the first movie on your film flicks.
Thanks, Mark. Clint James joins us from New York City. He's in Queens, and I hope you're staying safe and healthy up there. Tell us about your character, John.
Well, thank you, Burke, and thank you, Eddie, all of you guys. I love you all, absolutely. Well, I play the character John, and it was a very amazing experience that I had. John is a good old boy. We had him coming out from, the backstory was coming out from like a transplant and got some issues and ended up in West Virginia. And but originally, that's what we wanted to go with. We were working on the accent. We had some a little bit of questions about that, and I was a little nasally with it. So I just used my brother Matt for the accent and went with that. And then Eddie said, once we got on set, he goes, "Go bigger, go harder," and we got some beautiful things out of it. So yeah, it was a really cool, beautiful experience, and hats off to all those guys that go down, because I tell you what, man, what we experienced was nothing compared. I mean, it's not even it's night and day. It's we're actors, I mean, these guys and girls, they risk their lives every day. It's just insane, and so we just really we're very fortunate to be able to be able to do our daily lives, and because these guys are digging right now, you know. So I don't know, maybe that's a little too much there, right there, but I'm sorry. But
That's all right. Words from the heart. And you may have seen Clint and Mark in Magnificent Seven with Denzel Washington. And by the way, Clint didn't mention it, so I will. Clint's an Air Force veteran. We thank you for your service, sir. My fellow native West Virginian is Kevin Sizemore, who joins us from Los Angeles, California. And Kevin, like me, you grew up in the coal fields in Mercer County, West Virginia. You grew up around these guys. So the opportunity to play Daniel in this movie, I know we've talked about it, must have been very special when it came your way.
Well, yeah, thank you, first off, Burke, for that kind introduction, and thank you all for having us on here. This is fantastic. I think we're getting probably more out of it than you are. We're just excited to all come together again because we haven't seen one another in a while. Yeah, when this came across my way, as soon as I read it, it's the first script in a very, very, very long time that I was yelling from one side of the house to the other to my wife, going, "Honey, this happened," and "Honey, that happened," and I was so excited because I just felt like first off, there are not many movies made about West Virginia, and as soon as I read it, I just knew that there was something special, because if you can tap into the real lives of these men and women that do so much for the country, for the world, if you can just tap into their daily lives just a little bit and really hit home on who they are, people will fall in love with these people because they're wonderful, hardworking, blue collar people. And I think what Terry said earlier, that line is what resonated with me. Because when I spoke that line, we all had that meeting. I didn't realize how important that line was until the movie was made. And anytime I have ever done an event or anyone ever talks about the movie, that's a line they quote to me because it really stuck with them. So, it all comes back to your writing, which is what Eddie did. He wrote a great script. And I've always said it, being from Princeton, West Virginia, I've always said the miners are our heroes. And now we have a bunch of heroes. Not only do we have everyone on the front lines doing all they're doing, the nurses, the men and women are driving our vehicles all across the country so we can get food, the law enforcement. But, our miners, they've always been our heroes in my eyes. So thank you.
You're welcome. And I know it must have been very special for you and the other cast members to actually go back and do the premiere of that film in West Virginia, along with the director and producer. And I wonder very quickly if you can remember anything that the miners came up to you and told you afterwards, Kevin.
Oh, yeah, 100%. We did a screening at the Chuck Mathena Center in my hometown of Princeton. And not only was it, I think we had 850 people show up, literally, and they all pretty much stayed until the very end. But what was great about it was we had so many people, and some of them are actually in the movie in the end credits. They were there. And, we rolled the dice on this. Eddie and I talked about it. We rolled the dice saying, if we premiere this with a bunch of minors, what if they don't like it? So that was a big gamble. And we rolled the dice, and we had a few technical difficulties at that screening, but for the most part, it was great, because at the end of it, these miners came up and they were talking about how, their father passed away, but this is all they know. And this is the life that they live, and they want to do the best they can for their family. And they would hug us and we would cry together, and it was beautiful. It was really, being a part of this movie has, when it's all said and done, is going to be one of the most important projects I've done. Is it going to be the most famous? Probably not. Is it going to be the one that makes the most in the box office? No, probably not. But what's great about it is how it was made, and you'll get into that with Tim and Eddie and Matt and ANAITTE later, how it was made, and the effects it have on the Appalachian market, which I think is second to none.
Thanks, Kevin. And tell you, those coal miners, I've always said they'll give you the shirt off their back even if they don't have it to give. The best people in the world. You'll notice all the guys, for the most part, with the exception of Terry, have our quarantine beard. So we needed to bring somebody in to class this joint up. And that would be Miss Erin Elizabeth Burns, who played Teresa in the film. And I think most of the folks who are on the Zoom call tonight, Erin, have seen the movie. But if they haven't seen it or they're unclear what you're doing with all these scruffy looking guys, tell us about your character in the movie.
Yeah, I boss them I'm the boss. No, I was the manager of the mine. So yeah, I was their boss.
As it
I played
should be.
Teresa.
As it should be.
Teresa, she was the manager of the mine, and the villain, as it's been duly pointed out to me from viewers of the film. But a villain that has a change of heart for sure. But Eddie actually took us down into a coal mine, and I just want to say thank you to Eddie for allowing us to have that experience, because I'll never forget it. And I just want to thank every single coal miner that's on this, because I remember coming back to my apartment and flipping on my light switch and actually considering where that came from for the first time in my life. And it was very, very, very humbling. We were down there for 30 minutes and you guys are down there for 14 hours a day. I could never do what you do, and I have so much respect for what you do. So thank you.
Thanks, Aaron. And folks are sending questions in on Facebook Live. We thank you. We're going to get to as many of them as we can. So Lisa, let me throw it back to you.
I actually think Connie has a couple of questions she was going to come on with now, Burke, if that works.
Oh, perfect. All right. That sounds great. Connie, what do we know? What are people asking?
Hi, good evening, everyone. Thanks for joining us. I'm Connie MABIN. I'm the Director of New Media for the Steelworkers Union, and I'm part of the team that's working to monitor our Facebook feed, which is really popping tonight. Lots of people tuning in, having fun. Really excited to have you with us. So thanks again for joining us. We have lots of questions about the making of the movie and some questions about characters as well. So I'll try to get to a couple and then we'll come back so that we can get a chance to get to everybody. Lots of questions for you, Mark, about your accent. You don't sound like Kenny, so people are wondering what's up with the accent and how did you learn the dialect for the movie?
They are spot on, actually, Connie. I'm not from West Virginia. I'm actually from Manchester, England originally. Although I've spent most of my life now here in the States. I moved with my parents in 1992 to Tennessee, where we lived for 4 years. My dad bought a cabinet. He was a kitchen maker, and he got into auto parts of all things. He did that for a little while, and so I guess I was integrated into the South there. That was my point of entry. And we used to go around all over West Tennessee and into Kentucky, and we'd be delivering auto parts. So got to work with a lot of salt of the earth folks, heartwarming folks, and yeah, I think that's probably where I got my my footings for the accent. But yeah, just working it every day. You know, I think I have to kind of bend my accent in Tennessee to even eat. If I didn't roll my R's a little bit, I'd be hungry. Let me tell you. So yeah, kind of have to assimilate a little bit and let them understand you. My name is Mark in Tennessee, and if I go into a shop, I'll ask for a water, not a water, because I'll be looking at my clock. I'll be a few minutes later still looking for that water.
We have lots of folks from the South tuning in. Just to give you all an idea, we have people from Canada as well as Georgia, Tennessee, West Virginia, Ohio, Pennsylvania, all over the United States, really, as well as Canada. So I'm sure our Southerners and West Virginians appreciate that. We had a question from Kimberly Wimbush. She wants to know, does the film depict the state of mining these days? Is it really that dependent on the miners? She wants to know.
That'd be a great question, I think, for Dave, who has a lot of experience underground. So how realistic is this movie to mines today?
You know, I think it's important to say that as we went into really crafting this film, there was a decision made to not make it any particular time period. So it could have been 80s, it could have been 90s, it could have been 2000s, it could be now. You know, some of the equipment had to be dated a little bit. So the orange CSA Rescuer, for instance, that was the big failure at Sego Mine, we definitely wore those on the belts, but we intentionally went out of our way to make sure that it wasn't a dated piece. Now, having said that, really, from a character standpoint, this is the way that at least the Appalachian coal mines work. It is family, it is community. Everyone knows each other. Everyone's families have known each other for a very long time. So that is the case. As far as the workings and the operations, we hope that these kind of mines are dying out, have gone away, are not still running that way. But I have to say, I've been in enough in Eastern Kentucky and some places. I better not draw out names of places, but have been in enough places where, yeah, sure, there's still some people who are really trying hard to make a living and are willing to do whatever it takes to make that happen. And that is really the resonating theme here, is that people will do what it takes to make the living. And so some of these mines still exist, and if coal prices go up again, you'll see them come back again. And when coal prices are down, they're not as much. But it really fluctuates. But yeah, some of this still goes on.
And what you said there, Dave, is a great leeway into what Leonella Padron wants to know. She says the movie is very relevant with workers from all industries today having to make the choice between making a living and supporting their families or refusing work to protect their health and safety. And she's interested to know from the actors in the movie, looking back in retrospect, do you think your characters made the right decision to choose work over safety?
Let's throw that one to Terry. What do you think? Did they make the right decision? Because you were certainly conflicted. Your character was in the movie.
Wow, that is a remarkable question, especially given the conditions that so many of our frontline workers are laboring under today. Did they make that the right decision to go underground? Ultimately, I have to believe that they did. Not because they were putting themselves into a hazardous working situation, but because in solidarity with one another, they made the decision together that they were going to go underground and continue to work to support their families. And it was their support for one another that drove that decision. I think it was their love of one another and their sense of brotherhood and community that put them back underground into that situation, because they weren't going to let one another go in there without each other.
Great. Anyone else want to take a stab at that question?
I just got to say that I really respect Terry's answer there, because it didn't end so well for him, did it? So that in retrospect, I think you can't live your life, with that fear. You like everyone here, we want to provide and we want to survive and live for as long as we can, but I don't think you can look to the worst. You have to look forward and hope that things are going to turn out in your favor in that regard. So, but that's a great answer, Terry. I respect that, sir.
I wonder, yes.
I was going to say, I think one of the interesting things about this conversation is that one of the current debates right now is whether or not OSHA should step in and actually come up with some regulations, national regulations for the safety of workers in these essential functions, and as workers start going back to work. And one thing that we know about mining in America is it is actually our most regulated industry. Laws were passed in the beginning of the 1970s that have very strict enforcement in that sector. So that was one of the things that we heard from our miners when they were talking about the kind of mining work they do, is that because a law was passed that can never be weakened in the United States, they can only change the law to make it stronger. That at least in the mining sector, there are very clear rules. So that was one of the things that our miners talked a lot about. but they also talked exactly about what Terry was saying about this sense of brotherhood, family, solidarity in the movie. And so one of the questions that people wanted me to bring up, our brother Owen, who works in the steel sector, Jamie from mining, they had the same question, like, when you wrote that, Eddie, and this sense of brotherhood, how did you write that? And then for the actors, how did you manage to like bring that so to life on screen so that every single member that we have that watched this movie said, yeah, that's spot on. That's what it's like, because these are our families. We're with them more than we are our actual wives and husbands sometimes. So I'm curious about writing those characters.
In general, writing the characters, like us as Appalachians, us as West Virginians, I think there's a brotherhood and a sisterhood just between us. So by default, I think we all live in that reality. As far as mining, like I'm an Appalachian history buff, so I do understand the lineage of what miners. And then third is I based all these characters off of real miners that I know, like people that I actually really care about. So it was very, just by default, that's how I write. Like I feel that I'm an Appalachian writer, and I want to write what I know. And what I do know is that brotherhood and that friendship and that bond that those people have.
I think it's interesting, like just for the actors, we've seen that among you guys too. You seem to have this sense of being workers who work together. And as workers, one of our members, Gabriel, one of our next geners, wanted to know, are you represented by a union, and who's your union? And if you need to refuse unsafe work, what's your right to do that?
Kevin, can you take that and talk about how that works for you guys as actors?
Sure. Yeah, it's a Screen Actors Guild, and a few years back, we had a big issue where we went on strike, and now after that's happened, now they've actually merged with the American Federation of Television Artists, which is AFTRA and SAG. It's more the television newscasters, for an example, just to make it easier, more like the television newscasters and soap opera actors, for example, merged with TV actors and film actors, just to kind of simplify it. But since then, it's now just called SAG-AFTRA, and we're represented by that union. And if there's a situation on the set, for example, to where we feel that it's too dangerous or whatever, if we just felt that need, we would approach the director or the first assistant director and say, hey, I just don't think I can do that because X, Y, and Z. And one or two things would happen. They would either say, well, let's rewrite it, let's reshoot it to where you're safer, or we'll bring in a stunt double. And, if anyone has ever done the stunt community, I mean, these guys and gals they save us a lot. So, the miners are making us really look good because, we're just acting and we're down there trying to figure this out. But these stunt guys and gals, they save us a lot. So the union will come in and they're there to protect you. They're supposed to protect you to make sure that you're not doing things that will endanger you. And, just about every set that I've ever been on, everyone else can chime in if they want, but they'll have a union rep pop in and, they'll just look around and make sure everything's up to snuff, and they'll ask a few questions and go from there. But I will throw something at Eddie real quick, because he did say something to me when I was first talking to him, or to the cast. He said, I'll never ask you to do something that I wouldn't do myself. And for a director to say that, automatically you just trust him because he knows he has your best interest in hand. So when you have a director looking out for you and you have a union that's there to protect you, because, when we as actors, when we do a job, we're not just trying to punch the clock and leave. Our income is based out of residual income. So what we do today is reflected on what we hopefully will get paid for years to come. So that's why we have to be very specific on the jobs we choose.
What about Clint? Did you have a stunt double that did that flooding scene?
Yes, Kevin did that. Thank you, Kevin.
What was that like when you filmed that scene? How long were you in the tank? How much? How many times did Eddie say, "Let's do it again. Let's do it again. Let's do it again"?
It was horrible. It was a horrible day, and I never want to experience it again. But it was magical. It was beautiful. Yeah, the whole thing was just really, it was really cool. We just we're in this huge tank. Tim, what was that? When you guys built the whole tank, what you guys called the tank? What you did?
Basically, above the ground swimming pool.
Basically, right? It's like a giant
with a removable ceiling, and then we had this big dump tank that would dump like 600 gallons all at one time to, move the actors quickly through frame. They just washed through frame. That's the amount of water.
Exactly. So we got Maddie's under the water, and we're doing my. Don't want to be a spoiler, but this character passes away under the water, and so, but to get that right mouth and the blood to come out, we had to go it over and over again. And so then we got everybody else doing water down our faces and all that stuff. And the thing is, with Terry, I look up to Terry as he's just an amazing actor, but he's also like a leader. Like, he just really took control of us, and anything that he said, I went ahead and said, yes, okay. He's our section leader, our foreman, but he's also somebody that I respect as an actor, and I look up to him. And it's like, we're just all working for him. So what he said, I went with. So if he said, you guys shouldn't do this, you guys shouldn't do that, or whatever, it was all like, yes, sir. That's what I'm talking about. And so he was always there on point with, about the safety and all that stuff, and everything was safe. But it got to a point to where it was like, is it? Is it? And it absolutely was. Everything was. And Eddie was on point. ANAITTE, the whole production was all, SAG showed up. Our union showed up. They were awesome. There was nothing that really messed with my mind on it, except for the fact that I had to keep going underwater and dying over, trying to get the right shot. But,
So Matt, when these scenes happen with someone like Clint or any of the guys, are you in that mindset with him? Are you in the pool with Clint? It sounds like a really demanding job for a director of photography, because some of those shots you got were just amazing.
Actually, Burke, this is the only scene in the movie In the Mines that I did not shoot. We actually had Mark Dobiecki from Commander Camera came in as the camera operator. He's done really big movies like the Fast and Furious franchise, and he was not only the one who was the camera provider, the vendor for the film, but he also acted as our underwater camera operator. So Eddie and I would tell him, this is what we need and this is what we need you to do, and he was in the tank with them with his underwater housing on the camera. And he's got plenty of experience with that. So in those situations, you hand it over to the expert for that specific genre, whether it's Steadicam, cranes or jibs, aerials, or underwater. And in that case, we were lucky enough to have Mark, who was on point for that and did a great job. So.
And how do you film in the complete darkness like that? I mean, the lamps from the helmets were just amazing. The way it cut through was so realistic.
I have to say it's absolutely the darkest project I've ever worked on, and that was a blessing and a burden in many ways. But we had done some tests in Los Angeles 2-3 years prior, and we liked the results, and then we just sort of refined it as we went along. And it was extremely minimalistic, but you add a little haze in the air and some atmosphere, and you get the beams of light going, and it just immediately looks great. And the whole cast was really wonderful in that they were sort of all extra gaffers, which is the chief lighting technician as far as the nomenclature. But so they all acted as a multitude of gaffers, if you will, and we would communicate about the scenes and say, don't flash the light on the face, do it on the chest, or hey, if you're in the background, hit him in the back of the helmet. It's going to be a really nice backlight for him. It's really going to bring out all the elements that we want to see. Or we would spray the ceiling almost between every shot, would spray it with water so we get the drips. That would be the realistic condensation that occurs in the mines, at least the ones that that we saw, and would ask the guys to just rake the ceiling with their headlamps. So all those guys did a fantastic job as far as helping me to light the situation, because it's the darkest thing I've ever done. And it's sort of the ballsiest lighting that I've ever done because it's so minimalistic, but the results, we're really happy with the results. So.
And Connie and Lisa, I know we've got lots of questions are coming in. One more technical question, and that's for ANAITTE. When the fire comes through the mine ceiling, is that something you, I'm assuming, added afterwards? Because these guys would have all been scared to death. How do you do that? How does that work?
It works in the dirty job in front of a computer. It's particle effects, and then I manipulate it to move in a particular way, how it needs to look, if it needs to come to the camera, and then it gets added onto the surfaces, and then the surfaces need to be lit as if they were lit with the fire. Then there has to be some practical lighting on set in order to capture that, because there's so much you can do on a 2D image. We're filming in a 3D environment and an immersive environment that turns out to be a 2D image on your screen. So there's so much you can actually highlight once the image is flattened. So with the help of the mat and the gaffers and the scripting and the setting of there was a lot of pre-production done on all the scenes, because in order to accomplish good visual effects, things need to be in place in order for then to be able to work and not have to do a lot of problem solving at the end. Yeah, so that's how it was done.
Pulling back the veil on the magic of movies. Lisa, back to you.
I was just going to say, Kevin, we're getting a lot of questions about the scene where your arm is cut off. So a lot of people want to know how that happened, how you made that visual effect so real. So lots of questions about all the horror of the movie, I suppose.
Sure. Emily, of course, is not here. We had a wonderful makeup team, and we worked on this for a few days to make sure it was right. The arm that is supposed to be taken out is my right arm, I have a bad shoulder, or had a bad shoulder. So the whole process was they had to take my arm and, yank it as far back behind my back as possible and kind of tie it, we would tie it there so it would stay still. We would put like it looks like a football shoulder pad right here. And again, that would all be tied together with the arm. And then they would have what you see, hanging out with the blood and all that stuff. That was interesting because, I didn't know how far Eddie wanted to go with that. I knew that, did we want to show it to the camera when I'm crawling, down the mines on my hands and knees. But the good thing that really was powerful about that is it's almost when you watch some of these horror films, you don't always see the creature, but you get little pieces of it. And I think by us just showing little bits and pieces of that arm, it actually played better than just letting you get a good close-up of it, because it was just so gnarly and just disgusting. That to me was interesting how they shot that, which Matt was literally just, I think he was scooting. Were you scooting on that, Matt, or were you like crawling, like on your hands and knees? I can't remember when you were backpedaling on that, because I was coming towards Matt and he just kept moving back and back. And, you're looking at less, 3.5 feet of crawl space. So this is not, this wasn't easy, and we didn't have any room to the sides. And what I did was, it was Matt. It wasn't me, really. I mean, I'm crawling through just trying to show my arm a little bit and trying to make it look like I'm going through this. But this was 100% Matt with the camera, finding the shots that play to the audience. So I would like to defer that over to Matt more than me, because he's the Superman on this one.
Cool. Matt?
Thanks, Waylon, Kevin, Sizemore. I think those were all on little dolly tracks. Eddie and I, for a long time, tried to figure out how are we going to do moving shots when we only have 48 inches of clearance and no dolly will fit in there. So for a while, we were trying, talking about a little, I don't know, like a tricycle or something, or like a Hot Wheels or something sort of thing, or like a go-kart with pedals, so I could back pedal and go forward as well. Ultimately, we just went with putting tracks on the ground, and I had like a string, like a rope that I would pull the camera back to do like shots moving back, and then I would let it out for shots going forward, and we just use gravity to make those shots work. So hopefully that clarifies that. And you did the rest of it.
And speaking of shots, so many of our members, I know in the conversation, Lisa, with the members the other night, and also in the live feed right now, are talking about the scene where the Red Hat is going down into the mine for the first time. And one of our members, Chad Sullivan from Houston, Texas, is on the feed tonight. Hey, Chad. He wants to know how you shot that scene and how you made it. He said it made him feel very uneasy. And I think some of the folks we talked to the other night said they felt claustrophobic. How did you get that effect of making people actually feeling that whenever that scene occurred?
Eddie, let's speak to that scene, because that is the scene that I get asked about the most, is when you guys are heading in and you tell the kid the story, and how did you put that all together?
To me, outside of the miners speaking at the very end of the movie, is the most important scene of the movie, because Drew Starkey, who played Ryan, his character is the audience. So just like any of us who go into the coal mine for the first time, we have that particular fear. And the other miners who've been working underground for a long time, they don't have that fear. So the audience has that fear going underground, just like Drew. So Drew is the gateway of the audience into the coal mine. And what we did is just went to the real coal mine, and we had very limited amount of time. And I knew, like I said, I knew writing the script, that was the most important scene of the story, because it's the first time the audience is going underground. Like, everybody knows what coal mine is, and they go into the hole and they don't know what happens after that. So this was the first time to pull back that curtain and show that. And Drew, you know, his character was written really for that scene. And he was an amazing actor at it. But how we did it is we went to the coal mine, the real coal mine, and we filmed the real coal miners taking our skeleton crew in and out of the mine about 4 or 5 times. And then we went on the set and recreated that tunnel. And we actually brought back a real man trip, and we just pushed the man trip through our set. And we would only have, like, you know, a roof and then a wall on the left side. So we'd film all that, and then we'd put a roof and a wall on the right side, film all that, and then cut it with the actual real footage from the real coal mine of the real coal miners. So we just, between us filming that and ANAITTE adding elements that actually stitched it all together, that's how it happened.
And it was interesting, I'll say, from the coal miner perspective, to watch some of how that was done too. They had the man trip, and some of us were on the front of the man trip, hopping up and down on it. And me being the biggest guy in the bunch, had to use my heft for some of that, to actually move the suspension to watch these guys shake, because it is a bumpy ride on the way in and on the way out in those man trips. So there was all of this piece, but I have to also say to Tim, for that scene, you've got the camera looking at the top, and that was, some of that was real coal mine footage and some of it wasn't. Understand, those of you who have been in coal mines, that a lot of that footage is carved out of styrofoam and painted. And so all of the minor marks were on all of that. The roof bolts were put in. I mean, to do an underground coal mining movie in a styrofoam tunnel is just, it was an amazing thing to watch the magic that these guys could really bring something that I know so well to make it look as real as it did.
And I was the guy that drove the man trip, so, and I almost took out part of the set as I'm backing it up. So just so you know, we had to go down, and Eddie and Tim and all their crew had this whole thing, this whole corridor that's going down as Kevin is telling his story going down. As you know, and then we had to back this thing up. I had to back this thing up to come back and try to find out there's no lights back there, whatever. I remember tapping it a couple of times. It's like, oh my God, I'm gonna take this thing out. And so, yeah, that was a long day. But yeah, everybody was shaking and yeah, that was a fun day. It was intense.
Hey Tim, how long did you and Eddie, because you guys did this by hand, how long did you guys do this? I mean, before we even got to set, give us the background on that.
It was a 11-month build. A handful of young students and interns, and then Eddie and I, and we had a few skilled workers, but it was challenging at times, and just the length of time to keep people around and their interest in carving that was challenging at times.
So, by the way, we did this over 11 months when everybody's doing other gigs, so it's almost like passion project. And I know we're speaking to the United Steelworkers today, but our IATSE, IATSE, they are the union for like grips and electricians, and Tim could tell you exactly who they cover, but they have a trainee program for all the big Hollywood films that come to Atlanta, where they train them for them to be able to work on big studio movies. And Tim's friend, and now my friend, ran the trainee department for the IATSE. So if it wasn't for the IATSE union in Atlanta, we would have probably not went forward and started building the set. So, hats off to the IATSE in Atlanta for providing us that labor and for helping us.
Thanks, Eddie. I think other than the questions we've been talking about the building of the set, about the red hat going in, the thing we hear the most about, and maybe what was most horrifying to many of us, was actually Erin's character, Teresa. Because the movie opens up and you sort of think maybe there's a hint that she's having a relationship with somebody's husband until you find out that she's the foreman on the job. And so our women of steel in our union particularly wanted to know from Erin, so what do you think was going on in Teresa's head? She starts out, basically tells the guys to get under the ground, to go to work. She threatens for them not to call MNSHA, not to call in safety personnel. And then somewhere in the movie, something changes. So people just wanted to know from Erin, sort of like, how did you understand Teresa and how were you able to play that role?
Yeah, thanks for the question. Well, obviously, of course, it was a collaboration with Eddie. We had definitely talked about it, and but I saw her as someone who also has a boss, someone who also, answers to someone else, and being just as conflicted as the miners, because the second that she makes that call, she's also out of a job. The guys are out of a job because of the importance of telling the story of the community and the people there. Everyone knows each other. It's not just people losing a job. Those are your friends, those are your family members, those are your neighbors. And I think there's such a deeper theme there, though. I think it has so much to do with, it doesn't become real until it becomes real. There's always been a risk, for those guys to go down there. There's a risk every single day, but they do it anyway. What are really the chances? And then once that happens, all of a sudden there is a shift. And I think her humanity steps in and she realizes these are humans. And making that phone call, albeit maybe that should have been made earlier, to avoid all of that, of course. But it's just a struggle between trying to stay in business and feed everybody's families and not shut it down, and risking these guys' lives.
I think, Erin, that's one of the reasons in our union, like one of our strongest departments is our health and safety department, And particularly, we were talking earlier about workers going out right now with COVID-19. And I know our health and safety department has been working tirelessly, making sure our members get all the best education. So if you're a worker out there right now having to go to work, if you go to the Steelworker website, USW.org, you'll find all kinds of webinars about how to work safely, the kind of questions you should ask, how to properly use equipment. So I think that is the challenge we all face. And I think that's the nice thing about having a union. And when we talk to our members, like Jamie, who is a health and safety guy, he said, you know, when I was doing health and safety, sometimes I would even have supervisors like Teresa's character call me and say on the lowdown, can you just walk by and notice something? Because I'm afraid to say anything, but you can. So I think that makes that character so believable, because to be that person in the middle and risking your job too. So I just know that people really resonated with that character and the challenges you were facing. Connie, do we have any questions that you'd like to ask? You're muted.
We'll try to get to as many of the questions as we can this evening. I know we're running out of time, but this was a really great question from Rosetta from Pennsylvania. She wants to know from the cast, what did you take away from your experiences meeting with the residents of the mining community?
That's a great question. And let's throw that one to Mark Ashworth. So when you went into these coal mining towns and the miners talked to you, what was that like? And what did you take away from it?
It was great. It was amazing. I mean, it's like Erin said earlier, you know, it changed my life. Just so many things that we take for granted when we live our daily lives, you know, be it buying bread, just like turning on the light switch. And yeah, they were amazing. They were very, very thorough. The mine that we did go to, they had a thorough safety course for us to go through before we went down into the mine. And you know, I as an actor, when you put on somebody else's shoes, you have that possibility to live another life. Sometimes they're easier to let go of, and this one is one that I'll carry with me forever. I was touched by the strength and the pride, the community. It was quite amazing, and I'm so grateful to Eddie and to the mine that allowed us to be there. I'm forever changed because of it.
And Terry, you, I saw your character Zeke the first time I saw the movie, and I thought, I know that guy. And then I thought, I know 100 of those guys. I mean, you just absolutely nailed it. And I wonder, was there a person that you met when you came into the mine that you modeled Zeke after, or how did you just become that guy, that real guy?
Honestly, I can't say that there was a singular person that I modeled him after. I grew up in the military. I'm an Army brat, very proudly so. And so I know these types of men and women in my bones. And it's not just the types of men and women that would go into a mine, but the people that put themselves, their lives, their families, and their livelihoods at risk for the rest of us. So I understood the dignity of this man. I understood his responsibility to himself, his family, his community, and especially his brothers underground with him, who were in the same foxhole, to mix metaphors. I've made a career to some degree about in playing these types of characters that had this kind of command presence, and I've been very grateful to be able to do that. So if I've modeled it after anyone, it's after my father. I take such great pride in being the son of an officer, and were my father a coal miner, I'd take great pride in being the son of a miner, or a steel worker, or a nurse. Or I believe that it is universal, this sense of dignity and pride and responsibility. So, and I also have to speak to the fact that something that Clint had said earlier, that I take a certain amount of responsibility as an actor, as number one on the call sheet, and that might not mean anything to anyone who's listening, but it basically puts me in the position of saying, look, this is my crew, and it is my responsibility to take care of them on set. It is my responsibility to take care of them in our underground. Which kudos to the set designers, Tim. You guys did a phenomenal job. I mean, everybody. It felt very much like we were going underground every day when we went to work. And I come from a stunt history in this industry. I started doing some of the larger projects that I've done as a stunt player. So I understand the inherent danger in some of the things that we are asked to do. I also understand that it is my right and my responsibility to refuse to do something should I believe that it is dangerous. I can bring that to my union rep. I can bring that to my director, to my AD, my assistant director. I can say that this is something that makes me feel uncomfortable, that I don't want to do this, or I don't want Clint doing this, or I don't want Kevin doing this. I think that we need to find another way to do this. So I took that responsibility very seriously. And I think that informed Zeke as well. And that informed my choices as an actor. It was my responsibility to these other actors and to the production and to Eddie and to his script, and then by extension to all the minors that we were trying to portray.
Thank you so much, Terry.
You're
I mean,
welcome.
I just think the way you said that is how we feel about each other, right? Like, we're a family, we stand up for one another. That's why we call each other brothers, sisters, siblings, because just like those coal miners that were in Eddie's amazing script, actually kin, as we would say where I grew up, that's what we are in the workplace. We're family, and we have to watch out for each other.
There's no mistake in that nomenclature. Absolutely not.
And to casting these roles, like to what everybody said, and even like Burke's first comment about Terry, like Terry was the first person that was cast, and it was really being able to watch his work and watch his his work that he's done, that he's not just a tough guy, that he can actually have that sense, like he has the emotion, he can have, he can wear all those different hats. And that's what made Terry so great, because Zeke was based off two important people in my life who were both section leaders, as well as when you think of a leader and you're from West Virginia, Zeke from Cabin Creek. So we had some of those things going on into who Zeke was. And I started, just looking at who's going to play that role. And as soon as I saw Terry's stuff, like as an actor, he can wear all those different hats. And that's what, and we all, and even the actors and myself and everybody hung our hats on, Terry leading the way from that.
Well, I am very grateful and forever humbled. Thank you, because this is, as Mark said earlier, this is a role that's changed me, and it's changed certainly the way I see our modern world and the way I see the people that work around me and provide all the wonderful things that I've come to take for granted.
It's very interesting you said that, Eddie, because when we had our discussions with our union group earlier in the week about watching the movie, so many folks thought that Zeke was a union leader. Before the plot developed and they figured out what was going on, that was sort of their read on the character was, oh, he must be the union leader. So it's interesting that you talked about the character that way.
Well, the two section leaders I based it off of outside of Jerry West in a way, were both work at union mines, and they're both like people you really like when they speak, you pay attention, So, yeah.
So one of the things you're talking about, this sense of family and this camaraderie, but I think somebody said earlier, my brother Scott, and was pointed out by Joan, one of our members from 3657, who also worked with the Pittston miners when they were back out on strike back in the day. They talked about the soundtrack of this movie. And we've talked about like all the violence and the explosions, but the soundtrack is so touching. So when you get to the last scene in the movie and they're there and they begin singing the miner's prayer. And so we had a lot of questions too, just about the sound. Like, how did you choose the soundtrack? Did you think about using some of the classics like, Hazel Dickens or Steve Earle? Because so much of Central Appalachia and coal mining is about the music. So changing the subject a little bit, but what about the soundtrack? Eddie, was that you, or who helped you develop that?
Well, it started with me. Nimrod Workman, to me, he was an Appalachian ballad singer. He started working in the coal mines. You probably, if you ever seen the documentary Harlan County, USA, he's the old man singing on the porch. I think he cut his first CD with the Apple Shop in Kentucky, maybe when he was 80 something before he passed away. So I listen to his music all the time. He's a big inspiration for the type of stories I want to tell. And Nimrod started working in the coal mines when he was 7 years old, and it would be pitch black and he'd be scared, and he taught himself how to sing to not be so scared underground. So that haunting voice is what I wanted to capture. And that coal miner song is one of my dad's friends from New Martinsville, West Virginia. His name is Roger White. And Roger wrote this song in the 70s. And it's more of a country poppy feel. It's called West Virginia, Carolina Coal Mining Man. So that song's very poppy and country, so we took the hook. Coal miner, shining your light. And I wanted a Nimrod Workman. And Nimrod's passed away, obviously, and you cannot find somebody that sings like him. However, it took me about 3 or 4 years to find the right voice, and I really did search up and down for that voice. And I found a 25-year-old kid in Atlanta, Georgia, named Max Godfrey, who sings, he's 25, and he sings folk music and Appalachian ballad music, go figure. And I found this kid, and he sang that hook for me very slow. And so he took the Roger White song, and that was our theme. We wanted to be like Country Roads Take Me Home, like it's something that ties it all in, like it was a theme song in a way. So that was that. It was a West Virginian singer, and then the musician was Nimrod Workman in my eyes. And then at the very beginning of the movie, when the coal miner's prayer is actually showing the text to it, Max Godfrey, he did the rhythm for it, and I wrote the lyrics to it. So I just came up with some lyrics, and he sang them amazingly, and that was the soundtrack. So nothing but Nimrod Workman was the goal for this.
That's beautiful. I think Connie has one more question, and then we're going to start to wrap up.
Great, thanks. Yeah, we have so many questions. We could do this all night, but we won't. But there are lots of questions about the end of the movie. Two things. Actually, Ryan Gaines, a member of our staff, wanted to know about the real life coal miners that appear at the end of the movie, and we had several people actually brought that up as one of the most memorable parts of the movie, even though it was sort of in the credits. So maybe talk about your thought process with including that. And then the second question about the ending of the movie was the ending itself. Lots of people say that when the ending appeared, especially with the song, they cried. And we have, I don't know if you've seen our Facebook page, but we had lots of discussion about the movie on our Facebook page last night. Lots of union guys talking about, I cried, I had tears at the end of the movie. So maybe if you want to talk about the end and why you chose to end the movie that way.
I chose to end the movie. What was the first part of that question? I'm sorry.
The real life coal miners.
Yeah, the real life coal miners, outside of Drew's scene, whenever we're going in the man trip in, that was the most important part of the movie to me, because I knew at the end of the day, it was not a big studio budget or a big time, but they are the real heroes of the story. And I wanted to do something that told a good story, but it honored them. And no matter how great these actors are and how much effort we tried to do, like there's nothing more sincere than hearing the real people speak. And also, the only research that the actors really got to do, and my only goal was they had to be characters and not caricatures. So before we filmed, everybody went to the coal mine and they got to meet all of those guys who talked at the end. They got, like, Terry got to meet the section leader. Everybody got to meet the people they're sort of emulating. And we even took the people speaking at the end, we took their clothes and we shopped at the coal mine thrift shops locally in Richlands, Virginia area, and like we gave them their clothes. So our actors got to wear those miners' clothes, and like those people actually helped us make the movie. And as you can see from what they said at the end, I mean, how amazing is it for them to open up and say, such, prideful things, So they were amazing. They were absolutely, sincerely amazing.
So I'd just like to say, Eddie was talking about heroes. And we've been talking about fictional heroes tonight, the people who were 2 miles down, got covered up, and fought their way out. But in our union right now, we have real life heroes. We have 1,700 miners, smelters, and refinery workers that are out on an unfair labor practice strike because their employer has refused to bargain a contract with them. They haven't had a pay raise in 10 years. 10 years, and their employer wants them to go for more. But that's not what they're not striking about their wages. They're striking about democracy, because every single worker should have a voice in their workplaces. And so we want to bring our Serpico workers to you, and they're going to put a feed on here. And if you want to stand in solidarity with real live heroes that are out on an unfair labor practice strike, fighting for democracy in their workplaces, fighting to make sure that we don't go back to place the way that we have these unsafe working conditions, please visit our website. The link is on there for you, and sign our solidarity pledge to stand with those heroes. And I think that, when you think about the coal miners and the heroism, we can't talk about this movie and forget Mother Jones, who helped organize those mine workers when she said, "Pray for the dead and fight like hell for the living." So I'd like to thank Eddie and the cast and give them a chance to have a little bit of the last word here. But I just want to say thank you for reminding us that we need to pray for the people who we saw fictionalized under the ground and their deaths, and know that real miners are getting killed that way, and that we need to fight like hell for the living. And that means making sure we have good health and safety protections for all workers across the country. So thank you, Eddie. Thank you for the cast. Thank you to the crew. I want to give you a last word and just see, is there something that you'd like to say to close us out? Is there a question we didn't ask, or just a comment you'd like to make?
I'll go first just to quickly get myself out of the way. Thank you to United Steelworkers, United Mine Workers, like miners, everybody. Thank you so much, Lisa, Connie, Scott, Steve, everybody who's helped us do this. Thank you so, so much. Like, we're sincerely honored and grateful. And I know Dave is here, but like, this movie doesn't get made without Dave's Pioneer Supply Company and Low Pro hard hats. Like, I'm telling you, I'm not pitching, I'm just saying, we didn't have, like, that is authentic equipment to even try to make a movie like this. And without somebody like Dave and Low Pro and Pioneer, and them giving really just giving us their shirt off their back to make this movie, we would not have been able to accomplish it. So thank you, Dave, for being here. But like, thank you for helping us to actually have a pair of work boots with real coal at the bottom of it, so we could get that on our hands and actually feel it. So thank you to everybody.
Dave, any last words?
I have to step in there and say, thank you, Eddie, for that. That was too kind. But the reality is that right now, I'm not sure how many people are watching, but the UMWA and the USW and the miners around the country, around the world, really are great American heroes, great heroes, even of course in Canada. The fact of the matter is that World War II wasn't won without coal miners. It's how your steel is made. It's and the steel workers and none of the important things of our humanity are done without the people that are watching this. And so, we tried to do the best that we could to honor. Eddie was committed to that from the very, very get-go. He came from a community where he couldn't go back if all he was going to do was come in and do cheap shots and try to make some kind of quick hit in and out. You know, he got to go back home and watch this film with his parents in his hometown of West Virginia. And, you know, so we tried to do this right. Of course, there's a lot of stuff that is film. It's Hollywood per se, but we tried to do what we could do to honor the reality of the situation. And Eddie, you and you actors and Tim and gang, Maddie, you guys just did such an extraordinary job, I think, at capturing what coal mining is about, what it fundamentally is, and why it is that people have coal running through their veins, why people don't get out of this, even though I guess they could. And it's a matter of duty, and it's a matter of honor, and it's a matter of lifestyle, and it's really, really important. And I think you guys did a great job, and I was happy and honored to be any part of it that I could be. Thank you.
ANAITTE, you spent a lot of time with this film. Any closing words from you?
Well, I spent 2 years with the film doing over 650 visual effects for it. And I did get a lot from it. I'm from Puerto Rico. I was born and raised in the Caribbean islands, and I had zero idea of the coal mining world whatsoever. And being involved in a project like this opened up my eyes to a reality that I really benefited from, but didn't even know, really existed. And I just was so impressed with the work that gets done into it, the people. It's mind-blowing, the solidarity. There's very few places I've experienced the solidarity of the West Virginia folks and the mining community. So I am a better person for having spent so much time on this subject matter. And I appreciate the attention that you guys are providing the movie with this event. And thank you very much for the opportunity to speak to all these wonderful people who are doing these such difficult work for all of us.
Tim, you made this mine come alive. You rebuilt this mine. What does this movie mean to you?
It's just real important to tell the story and just show the significance of what these people go through in their daily life to provide us with electricity and the risks they take to, help us, and it's helped mankind move forward in the evolution of, the industrial revolution. I think that's a big part of it. Just, being part of a family like the film industry is, it's rare you have an opportunity to, be part of another family like the unions, and, thank the Lord for that.
Matt Boyd, you shine your camera on some guys that don't ever get the camera shined on them, and I think you did a great service for them. What did Mine 9 mean to you?
It's the second project with Eddie. He's a close friend as well as a collaborator, and just honored to be a part of it. And hats off to all the men and women that are part of this whole industry that toil underground or above ground, and all the steel workers and everyone that's involved, because I can't imagine doing that day in, day out, and especially with the miners. And just hope that we did some sort of justice while we were, creating our art and making a movie. And just hope everyone remembers to suspend their disbelief a bit and realize that it is a movie, and we're not Hollywood. We're not some huge major studio. This was a man with a vision and not a lot of money or time to execute that vision, and we did our best. And just much respect to all the miners out there and the steelworkers.
Terry Serpico, what say you?
What say I? First of all, I'd like to thank the Brotherhood of the Steelworkers and the miners out there. Thank you so much for tuning in tonight, for being a part of this discussion, for being a part of this movie, for watching it and taking it into your hearts the way you have. It makes us all feel very proud to have been able to bring this story to you. I'm so grateful for the fraternity of the people you see on the screen here, of the film community and the my brothers and sisters on this movie. It has changed me personally throughout the course of working with you and subsequently. I'd also like to extend my heartfelt gratitude to the heroes who are on the front lines of the particular pandemic crisis that we find ourselves in now, and the solidarity with which all of our union brothers and sisters and all of the people who are risking their lives to work in very hazardous conditions today for the better of our entire world is something that cannot be overlooked or underestimated or underappreciated. So thank you all very much.
Coal miner, shining your light, working in the mine shaft as dark as the night. What you gonna do before you go back in? I'm gonna ask the Lord to let me come out again.
Bravo.
That was beautiful.